Good afternoon, folks. We are live once again. Let me get everything switched over. We'll run some real quick sound check to make sure I don't sound like garbage, and we will commence the jam stream. Alrighty then. Let's move down here a little bit. All right, how we sounding? You folks hear me okay? Hey, I see Bits is here in the chat. What's up, Bits? Welcome to the jam stream. You are indeed first. Hey, you beat Red Dragon for once. How is your Thursday going? All right, audio is coming in loud and clear. I'm gonna put on a real quick loop that I just threw together before the stream for some background audio, and I'll kind of explain what we're doing today. The Bit says I'm tired. Yeah, that's a mood. It's been a busy week, even though we had a holiday here in the States on Monday. I feel like the rest of my week, work-wise, decided to cram everything into the rest of the days I was here, so it's been super busy, like every single day. We'll be up through tomorrow. But at least the weekend is approaching rapidly. It says I decided to spend today organizing, which involved bringing half the stuff I own upstairs. That sounds exhausting. Were you moving units, or were you just moving stuff up floors within the same building? I'm at the point where I'm so old. If I have to move stuff, I will hire people, because I will pull something irreparably if I try and haul a bunch of heavy things. Moving stuff up in the same building. So like into storage. Hey, Red Dragon's here. What's up, Red Dragon? Welcome to the stream. Hope you're having a good evening / late morning. Yeah, I hear you. I think it was last year I had to move a whole bunch of old computer parts and stuff into my attic, which involved hauling a bunch of heavy boxes of computer gear up a ladder into a very small, and I think it was around summer at the time. It was hot, like a super hot attic space above my house. And I'm just going to pretend that stuff is not there anymore. Oh, Red Dragon said has been here for 30 minutes, but Twitch didn't load the page when you went live. Good job, Twitch. Well, you have the unofficial title of consistent first. All right. Sounds like sound-wise we're good with everything for now. Be keeping an eye on the audio readouts. It's been a couple weeks since we've done one of these. It says I relinquished my first to Red. He gets it all the time. You can have it this time. All right, if you're going to be lurking a bit, feel free to take a load off and relax. We'll be talking about Beatbox stuff for a while and then working on music for the latter half of the stream or so. Hopefully we'll be productive today. We shall see. So as far as the agenda, we'll be starting with warm-up as usual, doing some quick freestyling for getting the blood flowing and all that fun stuff. The topic for the technique and sound theory part of the discussion is something that we'll get into when we get there in a little bit. But I wanted to revisit the concept of layering when it comes to beatbox composition. It's something I'm actively trying to get better at, and I figured since I'm trying to learn stuff as I go, it'll give me things to talk about as far as here on the jam stream with people who might also be interested in beatbox stuff. So we'll do some practicing and talking about layering technique. And depending on how long that takes, we'll do that for a bit. And then the rest of the time after that will be for BGM brainstorming. I do have the synth hooked up as usual. It's off so that I don't get buzzing feedback. But once we switch over, I'll swap my mic source and we'll see if we can come up with some ideas. I actually don't know what some of my future music projects are going to be, so hopefully we can come up with some ideas for things in the far future. Right now, I think I've talked about it before, I've got the releases covered through the end of fall for sure, into early winter, but on into next year, I haven't quite figured out what I want to do yet. So maybe we'll figure some of that out today. Well, let me go ahead and clear off the background sample loop here. And this will be a good opportunity to check sound. I think sound wise we're okay as long as I don't point directly in the mic. If I point at the mic with a couple of my really sharp sounding snares, it'll peak it and it'll go red. So I'll try not to do that. But we'll go ahead and start with some warm up and freestyle stuff. And then from there, we will move on to technique and sound theory. For full disclosure, it is incredibly hot where I live today. As I was setting up, I noticed that the temperature was getting high towards the afternoon. So I'm probably going to be chugging water a lot more than usual today because I'm already sweating and I haven't even done anything yet. No fair warning. But that being said, let's go ahead and get started with some freestyle stuff. We'll continue to check sound and we'll go from there. Let's get it. Let's go. Oh, Jesus. Good Lord, we got a raid right when I was in the middle of warming up. Welcome, welcome, crew. Wazzy and all of the Toxicure mob. How's it going, folks? Let me get Wazzy a shout out real quick. What were you folks up to today? Just chatting, huh? Oh, it's Thursday. Was it floor yelling today? Hey, how's it going, Equestrian? Kydraman? Strawberry Cat, the idiot? How are you folks doing today? Equestrian says, Wazzy foreshadowing our death. Wait, she was prophesizing our deaths? Like Miss Cleo fortune reading style? That sounds potentially suspicious. I hope you weren't paying her to do that. Kind of morbid, too. Hopefully your deaths were funny. I've always said that if I have to go out unexpectedly for whatever reason, at the very least, I hope it's funny. I don't want it to be sad. I want it to be entertaining. But that sounds interesting, a little bit existential as far as the topics of discussion. But again, welcome. We are warming up. I was starting some basic freestyle exercises before we get into the actual beatbox technique and sound theory part of the discussion, to give folks some background as to, one, who I am and what I do and what we do here on these types of streams. First off, for those I might be meeting for the first time, my name is Raku. You may have heard me or seen me before. I hang around Wazzy's community as well. But we do a mix of gaming, art, and beatbox and miscellaneous stuff here on the channel. And today is a beatbox jam stream where I talk a little bit about beatbox technique for folks who might be interested in learning about beatboxing. Usually I'll bring a topic of discussion to the stream to talk about. We'll go through some sort of practice and drill stuff that I've put together just over my time in learning. And then after we do that, we usually spend a decent chunk of time here on stream brainstorming BGM ideas for future music releases. And we do that via my handy dandy RC505 loop station, which is currently just being used as a mic source, so a sound source, but it is a handy dandy capture device, so I can do things like capture a real quick beat and I can loop it, have it playing in the background, and add other tracks to it as well in real time. And normally we have this whole thing hooked up to my synth so that I can use my keyboard to add other instruments. But the whole setup is pretty handy because I can play around with the different sounds and take ideas from the chat and from the crew when it comes to coming up with ideas for future BGM release projects. I keep saying when we have these streams every couple weeks or so that one day I want to do like a hip hop brainstorming stream too, or maybe we can write a song with lyrics, not just instrumental stuff like I normally do. For things like, occasionally just for funsies, I'll do like hip hop rap type stuff, like I did for the opening song, which you folks have probably all heard for No Antidote. But I've never done a live lyrics writing session. Maybe that might be something to think about in the future. On the topic of deaths foretold, Kydraman says, she said I'm going to get AIDS from a stranger eating my toenails off. That is very specific. That is disturbingly specific. But I'm not going to judge. However you end up in that situation, good luck. A question says, I will die on October 3rd, 2041 by a hunter mistaking me for a rabbit, but live not until moose carcasses fell on top of me and the ribs impaled me through the heart. Again, very specific, not just general illness or old age or getting isekai'd by a truck. These are very specific things. I should ask Wazi what my death is going to be. Maybe I don't want to know. Maybe I want to be surprised. All right, let's clear this off. I'm not going to need it. But anyway, moving on from just the warm-up, let me change the caption here. We'll talk about some technique stuff. And I'll explain what we're going to be covering today. Technique, sound theory, as it relates to the beating of boxes and funny mouth noises. Let's see, we got a hydrate from Red Dragon. I was just telling the chat before we got raided that it is very warm where I'm at now. I am standing up at my desk for the stream, but I am sweating like crazy. So I'll be chugging water. Might have to go get some more later. But that's okay. Everyone, don't forget to hydrate, even if it's not hot where you live. Water is very important. So what are we talking about as far as technique and sound theory? The topic I picked for today to talk about on the stream has to do with a technique called layering, and as it relates to beatbox technique. And the concept is not anything earth-shattering. In fact, based on some things I'm going to kind of explain as part of the discussion, you folks at home that are listening to this can try some of these things yourself to illustrate what I'm talking about when it comes to layering. I'll give some examples of some basic sounds that I'm pretty sure everybody here is capable of doing, even if you've never done a day of beatboxing in your life. I would bet money on it. But the concept of layering means combining different sounds at the same time on top of each other to make it sound to the listener like things are being done all in conjunction and simultaneously, which, again, not a super unique concept, but it is pretty challenging when it comes to beatboxing and making sounds, just due to things like physiology and anatomy, and we'll kind of talk through some of those things. Hey, first time chat from Kimmy-kun417. Kimmy-kun asks, who are your top 5 beatboxers? First off, welcome to the stream. Glad to have you here hanging out while we talk about beatboxing stuff. Top 5 is difficult because I like a lot of beatboxers for different reasons. So I could probably give you some of my top favorites, but not in any particular order, because I like different aspects of their technique and different things they do, and it's tough to just rank them straight up. But off the top of my head, for heavy bass sounds, really aggressive, heavy drop type stuff, which I'm actively trying to learn and get better at, I would say King Inertia or Vocoder. for really complex technicality combined with some bass type sounds. One of my favorites from Vietnam is Trung Bao. One of people that you are talked about in the scene a lot would be champions from beatbox, grand beatbox, like D'Lo from the UK or Collapse from France. Let's see. I really like Soso, who's a beatboxer and looper from Japan. He's one of my favorites from like the loop station scene, but he also does like regular beatboxing and crew stuff. Let's see. Loop station wise, I do like a lot of loopers too. My favorite would be Brez from France. I like that guy's style a lot. I've learned a lot of stuff for the loop station from watching his tutorials. Other people of note, I've studied under a pretty decently well-known guy from the States as a teacher. He was my teacher for a bit. Dude from, oh, where's he from? Vegas, Las Vegas. His name is Kindo. He taught me for a bit. So I learned a lot from that guy. Real talented. Other than that, I mostly just kind of check in and out of the scene. I've talked a little bit here on stream about how I don't consume a lot of beatbox content anymore. I used to watch a lot of the big channels that feature like the battles and the shout out videos and stuff like Swiss Beatbox. But I don't really anymore, primarily because I don't want to inadvertently be influenced or rip off someone else's style. So I tend to be a little bit disconnected from what's going on in the scene now, but I'll check in every once in a while. I didn't really see much of the 2023. They didn't do 2024 Green Beatbox yet, did they? The most recent rounds of competitions were in Japan. I didn't really see. I just know who won. But yeah, that's a really kind of rough answer. Oh, okay, not yet. Hopefully that at least gave you some information, Kimi-kun. Feel free to. Yeah, okay. River is the one I saw last year, so the next year hasn't happened yet. France has won 2 years in a row for Grand Beatbox. That's crazy. Now I'm gonna assume, just because we're talking here, Kimi-kun, you must either be a beatboxer yourself or someone part of the scene. So if so, that's cool. I don't meet a lot of fellow beatboxers here, especially not VTubers. I only know of one other VTuber personally, and that's the Prince. There's some other people I know in the VTuber scene who do beatboxing, but none that I know personally. But anyway, so we're talking about layering and the idea of combining different sounds together to make kind of a simultaneous multi-track type of sound, I guess to be the equivalent. And I'm not an expert at layering, but I'm trying to get better at it because it adds quite a bit of dynamics to sound and makes things sound more complex to a listener if you're going to be, performing or just showing beatboxing to other people. I've found, just based on personal experience, that people tend to be more impressed by things that look difficult but still musical as opposed to things that are very technical. If you're talking with other beatboxers who understand how everything works, they're going to find technical stuff more interesting because they understand it. But if someone doesn't understand how beatbox stuff works and you do like a lot of really crazy speed patterns or technicality or real complex things, they might be like, oh, that's really interesting, but I have no frame of reference for why it's hard to do. Therefore, they might not be as impressed as someone who is seeing you do something that looks more musical or like a more fleshed out song. At least the people I've talked to, that's been my experience. And so getting better at layering gives you kind of more of that accessible complexity that people will be able to kind of understand from a musical perspective. So I want to talk a little bit about it because it's been several streams since we really discussed it here. So to break down the basic concept of layering, it's just combining different sounds at once to have them essentially playing at the same time. And Red Dragon says equipmentless layering. Yeah, so the stuff I'm talking about here is not loop station related. It's purely using all the tools at your disposal from anatomy purposes to get sounds to be simultaneous. It sounds more complicated than it is. But usually the easiest way to pair different types of sounds together that I've found would be bass lines with other types of instruments in the drum kit when it comes to beatboxing. So what does that mean? I did this a little bit in the freestyle and warm up, but I didn't point it out because I was going to be talking about it as part of this discussion. But if we think about a real simple beat, maybe something kind of mid-tempo hip-hop-ish, and we break it down to a real simple set of instruments. In this case, let's do just a kick, and instead of a regular snare, it's just going to be a click in place of the snare. So, for example, let's do something just like... And again, don't worry if you're actively listening along and trying to learn. This wasn't the example I gave earlier about being able to replicate this. I'm using this as an example. Layering, in this case, would be to add in something else that complements these sounds that's not within the same type of instrument kit. So not necessarily part of the drum kit itself. So for the sake of demonstrating what I'm talking about, I wanted to just use a simple hummed bass line when it comes to the set of sounds itself. I know it's kind of sounds hard to describe, but hopefully it'll make sense as I demonstrate. So if we just take like a hummed note, I can tell you what note, I can't read music, but just something like and we pair it with parts of the drum kit so that everything is playing at once as a subsection of the actual sound. You get something like I swapped out the kick for a hat just to make it a little bit easier, and I'm just doing like real quick. You ever like click your tongue at someone if you're trying to shame them? So just tongue back of the teeth to make that sound. That's how that hat sound is being created. So it's 3 components here: the hummed bass note, the hat in quotes, and then the snare is the click. So put together, that's how you're getting a and I'm doing one note just to keep it kind of simple. But the idea of being able to do all of the other sounds so that the bass line or hummed note is not interrupted is the trick and the difficult thing. Because if you aren't layering it properly and you're having all the sound come from one source from your mouth, then it's going to be broken up by all the things you're doing with your tongue for the other instruments, and the actual note gets fragmented. And again, I'm not a master of layering, but it is something I've been working on a lot lately. The way you can try this at home, for those of you that don't know beatboxing, when you hum, think about humming with your mouth closed and think of where the sound is coming from. So, straight up example. My mouth is closed, but you can hear the sound pretty audibly. And the reason for that is because it is essentially coming out of your nose. You've heard of people who do vocal coaching and singing talk about how you shouldn't sing through your nose because it makes everything sound nasally. Well, this is an instance of where you'd want to do that because you've blocked off the airway. You're not going, that's what it would sound like if your mouth was open. But by closing your mouth and directing the sound through your nasal cavity, that's how you're getting a And the way it works, I don't know the physiology specifically behind it, but you are vocalizing the sound with your vocal cords, just like you would for singing, but the sound is traveling through your nasal cavity unobstructed, and it is coming out audibly without anything blocking it, like your mouth. So just for example, I'm going to do the same sound again, but you should not be able to hear a difference in the way it sounds. So if we go, you should hear a really slight sound. My lips just make that noise because I'm opening and closing my mouth. But the idea is if you have the sound directed through your nasal passage and keep it there, you could be doing whole manner of things mouth-wise, and it doesn't affect the sound, which is how your rest of your anatomy, like your lips and tongue and whatnot, get opened up to be able to do other sounds simultaneously with the hummed note. So here's the practice thing for, again, those at home who might be interested in learning beatboxing. First, get comfortable just humming a note. It doesn't have to be a consistent note. Even if you can't sing, I can't sing either. Just a note, hum it, but first get it to come out of your nose, and you could do that by just keeping your mouth closed until the sound comes out audibly and unobstructed. Once you can do that, just practice doing that sound and then adding a click. I think most people can do a standard tongue click, just using your tongue, suction to the roof of your mouth to get that pops type sound. It's not unique to beatboxing, but the click itself is going to be your second instrument. So to illustrate what I'm talking about here, just a flat note, and then add a click. It doesn't even have to be on rhythm, but just practice doing those two things at the same time. So depending on where you do the click, you'll get a little oscillation, but it's not cutting the sound off. And depending on where you do the click, I think a TO click with the tip of the tongue a little bit further is easier to unobstruct. So that's more of a, that one would sound like, that one's easier for me to do constantly. And it doesn't interrupt the sound of the bass tone that's being hummed. And then if you add in the third instrument in the original example while doing the same combination of things, which would be just the tongue. I don't know what it's called. It's like a tongue clicking sound. It's a different type of one. I don't know what the official name for it is because it doesn't get used a ton in beatboxing, but the tisk tisk sound, depending on where you're from. Add that one with the hummed note, and then the click adds a snare in the pattern, and that's how you're getting the original thing I did to illustrate, which is the and just practicing those two things can get you sort of used to the idea of being able to have sounds coming from different parts of your mouth or head at the same time, which is the whole like core concept of layering. And taking that idea and expanding it a little bit more from beatboxing, you start getting into things like the more pronounced basses, like the vocalized basses become really useful when you can control what direction they're going from a sound perspective. So a hum note is fairly easy. I think anyone can at least hum a note, even if it's not constant. Because again, if you're a singer, obviously you'd be better at it. But if you take the note and you turn it into like a throat bass, so instead of a you have a so you get more of the texture. And I'm not going to break down throat bass stuff today unless people want me to talk about it. We've gone a little bit on a deeper dive into basses in previous streams, and we're on a good cadence of talking about it almost every other stream. But applying the idea to, again, layering, combining the sounds, but making the bass a lot more textured and having a noticeable sound to it, that's when you start building on that idea of layering. And that's kind of what I'm working towards as a beatboxer personally. So if we take the idea of the more, again, distorted, textured throat bass, and we add, let's see if I can do the exact same example and see how it sounds. I didn't practice this before the stream, but if we take the, that's a little bit tougher. So that tells me I need to practice that more. You get a little bit of distortion from just the tongue movement. I wonder if it's easier for me to do it with the TO click. A little bit. think I'd probably practice it with that one versus the regular click, since it feels a little bit more natural. But another thing that I think I did on one of the freestyle redeems at some point, because I wanted to practice it a little bit, one of the easiest snares of the big snares that are done to pair with something like layering, just because it requires no lung power whatsoever, is the BGM or spit snare. I think I'd be careful with this one. This one actually hits the mic really hard. So the spit snare, because it's done just by lip and mouth pressure, if you combine that with layering, you can do some really interesting stuff with it, because it's easy to do and not take up any of your airway space, any of your lung space, and you're essentially ending with a mouth closed position anyway. So if you were taking all that and putting it into like a hip hop ish type beat, you might get something like, which is combining all the things at once. That's more advanced than the example I did, I know, but practicing all of the individual things when it comes to getting the sounds to come out simultaneously, and then making it more complex and practicing getting good at that, is part of how you just branch out when it comes to learning the different techniques in beatboxing. You definitely want to start simple, which is why I use the humming example with a real simple click, just to introduce the concept of layering. But as you get comfortable with it and learn other techniques in beatboxing, whether it's things like the heavy vocalized basses, either throat bass or vibration, or combining it with other types of technical sounds to vary up whatever it is you're doing, depending on what direction you want to build. One of the things I find fascinating about beatboxing as an art form is you can choose how you want to focus. I do recommend, in general, like we've talked about here on these streams, that people start with basic stuff and work your way up. One thing I didn't really do when I first started learning, and I had to think a bit because it's been so long, I started learning beatboxing in 2019. So it's been about 5 years. 5 years this last spring. So I haven't been doing it that long. But I didn't have a teacher at the time, so my direction was pretty much just whatever YouTube tutorials I found to learn different sounds that I thought sounded interesting. And it wasn't until a little bit later that I started trying to focus on designing drills that were going to reinforce a lot of the basics. I kind of jumped and tried to learn to sprint before I could really learn to walk in some cases, specifically with some of the bass and technicality stuff. But like we talked about before, starting with just simple patterns and simple instruments in the core drum kit, as it were. Your kick, hats, snares. And if you don't have a musical background, because I don't have an extensive musical background either, using things like a metronome to learn how to keep time, stay on tempo, and keep on beat when it comes to doing real simple patterns in the beginning before you even get to routines, before you even get into the complex stuff. Just practicing the simple stuff until you can basically do it without thinking. And then once it becomes really comfortable, you start adding in other things and more advanced techniques. You can learn a new sound or a new way of doing a specific type of sound. And from there, kind of build up more. Because if you don't do that, and you kind of do what I did and try and just learn a whole bunch of different sounds all at once without a core set of basics, you might end up being able to do the really complex sounds, but you won't be able to use them effectively. And there's nothing really wrong with that. It just means you'll have to build up the skills in construction and consistency and things like keeping time and keeping on beat. Sort of after the fact, when it would probably make your life a whole lot easier to learn that on the front end when you're just starting out. But there's no law, unless you're in a standardized class with a bunch of people. There's no rule that say you have to learn a specific way. I just think I would have gotten better faster if I started kind of with the basic stuff in the beginning and then try to get into the more advanced stuff later. Like, I really wanted to learn a lip roll, for example, and I spent a good almost 2 years at the beginning of beatboxing trying to learn how to do lip rolls, just that sound we've talked about before. I couldn't do it because I was doing it wrong. Despite watching a lot of tutorials and whatnot, I couldn't do it correctly. So I actually learned how to do the inward lip roll first, which is just recapping something we've talked about before. Before even the basic lip roll, I learned how to do the more powerful inwards one, which sounds like the real kind of heavy bass punchy sound, which is useful for really aggressive drop type things, and it's on the mic, it's an extremely strong sound. But I learned how to do that before I could do the regular one, and it wasn't until I actually talked to a teacher and said, hey, I've been trying to learn this sound for over a year and a half. What am I doing wrong? And he just looked at what I was doing and said, your position is slightly off. You're trying to do it in the wrong part of your lips. Focus on doing it here and then just practice from that point on. And I picked it up in like a week. I couldn't do the sound really at all, and turns out my positioning what was causing the problems. And it does help to talk to people who are knowledgeable about beatboxing, so I'd say there's value in studying under the pros because they know what they're talking about. But also when it comes to different ways people do sounds, sometimes the way one person teaches it might not work for the student. And if you could teach things in multiple different ways, you can find something that works. Hey, first time chat from Rowie-sun? Rowie-sun5, is that how you say your name? Let me know if I am butchering your name. But welcome to the Jam Stream. We are talking about beatbox technique and sound theory. Big topic of conversation today was layering, but I was kind of taking a sidebar to talk about the importance of basics and forming kind of a basic skill set when learning. We've talked a lot on these jam streams about if you're just getting into beatboxing versus people who've been doing it for a little bit versus people who are looking to develop more. I'm not a pro. I was just telling the chat that I've only been doing this for 5 years, but I learned a lot and hopefully pass on some things that would make it easier for people who are interested to get into beatboxing and learn more. But overall, if I could recap what we've been talking about with layering specifically, if you're already learning beatboxing, then I think taking some of the examples as far as learning how to separate hummed melodic notes from other sounds in order to put them together is a really useful thing to figure out. But if you're brand new, like let's say today is the first day you decide to start learning beatboxing, layering is not going to be your first priority. I guarantee it. The thing people usually start or should start learning, I would say, would be the core basic parts of the drum kit. The kick, hat, and picking a snare, and learning how to do those 3 things first. And as far as branching out from there, kind of depends on what you want to focus on. Rowie-sun says, can you play a song for me? You can skip it if you don't like it. You mean, can I like create a song myself? If you're talking about playing something from another source, then I can't do that right now on stream. As far as if you want me to actually like freestyle a song, I can do that. I usually have a redeem for it, but I usually tell people for the jam stream specifically, don't redeem drop a beat here, because you can just ask me when I'm talking about beatboxing, and I'll just freestyle stuff on the spot. It's like a coupon. Today only. Dragon says drop a beat. Yeah, I can do that if that's what you're talking about. And there's the 5 hydrates, which is good because, again, it's hot. Let's see. What should we do for just like a real quick freestyle sequence of beats? Let's do something a little heavier. We were doing kind of mid-tempo hip-hop-ish stuff, but let's do something a little bit kind of more heavier, because I do need to practice and work a bit more on some of my bases. So let's do that. well, I'll put something together real quick, and then we'll do a time check and potentially move to doing BGM brainstorming. If you folks have questions about anything I've kind of talked through so far, by all means, let me know in the chat if you want me to talk about anything specifically. I always say open floor for questions no matter what I'm talking about. And don't be afraid to ask questions or ask me something or tell me I suck at beatboxing. It's fine. Open forum. But as far as a beat, let's again do something heavier. Oh, that just made me sweat more. Roy-san asks, can you try and beatbox this? But it will be... Oh, a link? Yeah, I don't have link perms turned on for security purposes here in chat. Unfortunately, I can't go and pull stuff up as far as links people post. But I guess maybe we can look at potentially on a media share thing in the future. So unfortunately, I can't do that. But when it comes to just general discussion about beatboxing stuff, then like I said before, for Red Dragon, free drop a beat redeems today within reason. No, don't ask me to do a beat every minute. We'll never get anything done. So looking at the time, we are coming up on an hour. I would like to spend a decent amount of time brainstorming things for BGM tracks. Roy-san says, sorry, but beatbox is cringe. Do LSD or something. Well, beatboxing won't get me arrested. So there's that. But hey, if it's not your thing, that's cool. All right. Before I go switch my sound sources, let me kind of explain what I want to do for the rest of the stream. We are going to hook up the rest of the stuff for the loop station. Again, it's just my mic source right now, but I'm going to switch my mic over to my other input so that I can hook my synthesizer up to the loop. And we are going to kick around some ideas for future music release tracks. And for folks who might not have been here for those, again, I'll explain real quickly what that is. Here on stream, and sometimes when I'm not on stream, I like to put together ideas for BGM tracks that are meant to be used as royalty-free assets for other fellow content creators. So just to real quickly shill my stuff, I promise I won't do it a lot, but the music that I've released is meant to be used, again, royalty-free for people who are either streaming or YouTubers who want to create content, and it is just out there to use, copyright-free. And in order to come up with ideas for said tracks that go into the different releases I do every few months or so, we brainstorm ideas here on stream. So once I get everything set up, it'll make a little more sense, but this is kind of a collaborative time for people to give me ideas or feedback or anything on what we're creating, and you might see your ideas in a future release. And usually I'll solicit names for tracks too, so I know folks here have named some of the tracks in my releases as well. So this will be a bit more of an interactive portion of the stream in case my talking about beatboxing is just boring you all to tears, let's actually go and tinker around with some music stuff. So, real quick, I'm going to switch my mic source. So, I have to plug mine into my Scarlett. So, I'm going to sound a little bit different, but I'll be able to hook up the keyboard and get everything playing through the loop station and everything and talk at the same time. So, let me go ahead and do that real quick. All right, this is my regular setup. You folks should be able to hear me per my regular gaming setup. I need to change my caption too. I forgot to do that. So let me do that real quick. And now we should have everything playing through the loop station, and you should be able to hear my synth now. And I need to enable that source 1 sec. There we go. So again, just to explain for folks who haven't been here for one of these sessions, I have this is a Yamaha. Yeah, this is a Yamaha synthesizer that I got as a hand-me-down. It is massive and takes up a lot of space, but it has, I think this is full keys and a ton of instruments, which is what I primarily use it for. Kimi-kun asks, for looping, do you use RC505 or something different? Also, do you use a second device? Good question. So the hardware I'm using whenever I'm doing these jam streams, and again, I am currently talking through my mic in my Scarlett, so it's not plugged into my loop station. But yeah, I have an RC505 Mark 1. I have not mastered the Mark 1 enough to where I feel like I can justify getting a Mark 2, but boy do I want a Mark 2 at some point. It's such a cool device. And there's so many more tools. You can make some neat stuff using the Mark II. But I got a Mark 1, and I don't have a second device unless you count my synthesizer. So my second device is the synthesizer I've got plugged in via aux. So those are the only two things I'm using. I'm not using anything else to boost the sound out of the loop station. It's just plugged in directly into my computer, and then the synthesizer is plugged in directly to this. So that means, let's go here. I can check my volume too to make sure I'm not blasting people's eardrums. Everything should be capturing fine. We can test it here. I'll make sure I set the playback on the 505 not too loud so that I can still talk over it. Yeah. Aside from me missing the end of that slightly, everything looks like it's coming in fine from the loop station. So to answer your question more directly, Kimi-kun, what we do here is using the instruments on the loop station effects and stuff combined with the synthesizer instruments is how we end up creating the different tracks. And let's see, I could save this one. Let me see. I recently pulled a bunch of my stuff off the loop station to record, so I don't have a ton on here anymore, but I might be able to find one of my tracks that I have finished, just to give you an idea of what a completed one sounds like. Let's see. I have a different source now, so I can just scrub through real quick and see where I have one that's recorded. Let's see, which one is this? I don't remember if we did this one on stream or not. Maybe we did. This one's not complete, which is why I said I don't know if we did this one on stream. But either way, what you're hearing is a mix of the sounds being captured from the synthesizer through the loop station. What I've been doing for my releases is not beatbox sounds and beatbox loops. I have done that before, but I've been primarily focusing on manipulating the instruments from the synthesizer with effects from the loop station to create the stuff that we've been doing for our releases. Just because it's a sound that I want to perfect a little more, because I don't perform. Like, I don't compete and perform for loop station stuff. If I did, then my focus would be a little bit different on what I practice. But oh boy, what track was I on? Number 5. I think 6. Yeah, we'll use this one for now. Oh, also Red Dragon has dropped a link to my Bandcamp, which has all of the BGM releases that I've put out so far. And that's where people can download them if they want to use the tracks for things like YouTube videos or content. If you don't want to stream it or don't have access to Spotify or Tidal, that's where my stuff is on streaming. But also on Bandcamp, you can download the files for free. And the stuff's meant to be royalty free. Just put $0 in the field in Bandcamp, you can download the tracks. I only ask that if people use them for content, that they just give me credit somewhere. You don't have to ask for permission. There's no copyright claiming on them. And so there should be nothing that flags on YouTube when it comes to using my music. And again, just general disclaimer, again, for people who might not have heard me mention this. If you do use my music for something and you get a flag that says it's been copyright claimed, then DM me on Twitter or on here or on YouTube and let me know, because I do not want people creating false copyright claims on my stuff. I will fight that stuff and get it taken off. So the stuff is out there if you feel so inclined. Our last release was a kind of mellow chill album of BGM tracks from, when was that? August? I want to say August. It was a summer release, and that was the Shaken, Stirred, and Chilled album. But next one is Halloween. I'm actively working on the Halloween stuff. I've been doing a lot of drawing. That's release is going to be in October. Hopefully by the middle of the month, we'll be done with the art and all of the commission stuff for that. So that's the next on the list, and it's getting close. I've got a little more than a month to finish. But that's okay. We'll get there. All right. So style-wise, I was thinking about doing something kind of mid-tempo-ish. This is kind of part of the stream where I solicit ideas from the chat too. But I think I want to do something a bit kind of mellow and ambient, but maybe something a little more moody and dark, as opposed to kind of uplifting and perky for like a mellow track. So I don't really know what that's going to sound like, but we'll start with establishing the rhythm like we usually do. And usually I jump between different instrument kits. So this right here is the electronic kit for like kind of dance synthy type stuff. But we can establish a bass rhythm and then add in other things from the other instrument sets to come up with the actual beat and rhythm that we can use to capture for the track itself. So what I was thinking was maybe not something like what I just demoed earlier, since I've used that. I've used that type of beat on a lot of things, or a variation of it. Kind of more trip-hoppy, smooth, a little bit jazzy-ish. I don't want to just do that again, so let's come up with something maybe a little bit slower. I can come up with a snare to pair with it too. maybe we keep the rim shot and then we can layer in something else, like maybe a more dull kind of snare head hit, because I don't want like a rock drum, or this is more like synth. If we were doing In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. Red Dragon says, maybe try one without drums. So something that's just all melodic instruments and no like percussion. I know I've done that for some of the RPG stuff we did in the past. That's an interesting idea. The reason why I start with the rhythm is because it sets the BPM of the track, and it's everything else will sync to that rhythm. So we could do that. It's just trying to add the rhythm after it gets a little bit tricky when you're trying to sync everything to the first melody track, if that makes sense. So we could mess around with that as a potential idea. We could do something that has like a rhythmic tempo to it, like a bass line, but it's not with instruments like percussion instruments or rhythm instruments. And I think a good way to do that would be to pair it with Slicer. So let's keep it kind of mid lower, slower tempo. So we go Slicer pattern 1, and we go eighth notes. And we can use the bass boost, but let's see if we can get the rhythm down first. That's eighth notes, eighth note cuts on this is just a string instrument. If we add in the bass boost, guitar to bass, this one doesn't like chords as much because it's essentially putting more low end on every input that's coming from the synth. So if I try and layer in 2 notes, it's trying to boost each one separately, and it kind of sounds more muddled. But if we did single notes, you can also check out the actual bass instruments. The one I use a lot is the dance bass because it's sustained, and it does get pretty low. On eighth notes, we can make it a little more of an attack. That gives it more like a signal sound. I think I want it to be a bit more smooth. Like that. That's not a bad sequence. All right, so we're going to try constructing everything from the bass line up with no percussion to start, and we'll see what kind of develops here. So first we establish the bass line using the sliced beat here. Yeah, that's not bad. All right, let's capture it and actually start building the track itself in the loop station. Okay, let me know if you folks have trouble hearing the playback. Okay, let's try and octave it. I'm trying to get the lower end, just 1 octave lower on the scale, but without making it sound really muddled, because the lower you get with this instrument, the more kind of rattly it sounds. All right, let's see if we can get this one. Yeah, slicer rhythm is causing it to kind of hiccup, which we don't want. So maybe do cutoff notes instead of a sustained. That's not bad. Wrong note. Here, I'm gonna make it louder in my headphones and stuff on the playback. Yeah, I think going lower with just this instrument kind of makes it sound weird. But if we paired it with strings, like unsliced strings, then I think that might actually sound better. Same notes. Red Dragon says maybe with a chime every 6 to 8 seconds. We'd have to put that on another track. So what we could do is have like a single note that comes in with like a resonating sound, and it comes in, but we got to put it on another track, I think, because this whole loop is less than 10 seconds. No, it's twice that. Okay, so what we've done is we've just layered in strings, same notes, with the bass line, and hopefully it didn't miss the rhythm too much. No, I think it's synced. Now, as far as like an intermittent sound, what we could do, kind of capitalize on that idea, is go like for one of the higher end synths. You get like a high sound that might just come in every once in a while and then fade out so that it's not beeping in your ear constantly. And we can actually use slicer and panning delay. So the idea would be to have something like two notes, it just steps down slightly, and I can turn the volume on that up a little bit. But the idea is that this is intermittent, so it's not looping in time with just the bass line. It's kind of staggered. So what I mean by that would be fact, we'll make it a little bit louder on the playback. Now, not having a rhythm is kind of messing with my brain a little bit, because I'm expecting there to be kind of a steady rhythm that's guiding the track, but it's the bass line that's doing that, which is not what I'm used to. It is interesting. That might be a little bit hard to hear. I recorded that one a bit lower so that it wasn't deafening. But next, I think we want to pair something in the middle. So we could go for like a different wind instrument. I'm going to turn that off. This is a clarinet, not exactly what I was looking for. Could even go for filter effect. This is presets to be able to use the filter to create that kind of signal beep. Which, that might not be a bad effect to pair. I don't think it really serves as a driving melody. But we can see, playing off of just the bass line itself, what kind of option that gives us. Okay, if we turn the intensity down on the filter, it kind of muffles and becomes kind of bloopy. That's probably not ideal. If we were trying to create a signal, we want it to be kind of clean sounding. Let me try this filter. I have them set on different inputs. Oh, it's that one. Yeah, we don't want to use that one. Red Dragon says, sounds very close to one of your space songs. Yeah, I think part of it is the bass line is a little bit similar note-wise, but there's no rhythm. So the way we distinguish it and make it kind of more unique is by pairing in the other instruments. And I have used Slicer kind of, not a lot, on every track, of course, but I have used it frequently since I like the fact that it creates a rhythm and it does it consistently, so I don't have to worry about timing things as much. But let's take a look. This is more of a muted synth brass. What if we give this a pan? Makes it a little bit more ominous. Or we go single note. I was just messing around with chords to see how a two-note chord sounds. That's not bad. This is just one step down. Not bad. It does kind of pair a little bit with the bass line, and the signal, the intermittent signal, just kind of comes and goes, which is what we wanted initially. The lack of beat is still throwing me off, though. Let's go ahead and save this so far. This is kind of an interesting experiment because, again, I haven't constructed a track in this fashion, in this style before. Some of the RPG ones we did for Songs of the Spiral and Lost Kingdom didn't have percussion. There was no rhythm, but they were also kind of more like melodic and orchestral, so they didn't really need it. But it is an interesting contrast with how things kind of come across. What if we add something that'll, again, kind of guide more of the tempo with like a piano? Originally, I was thinking harpsichord. I like harpsichord, and it's good for kind of darker sounding songs. But let's go to the piano presets and see what we can pair. We'll take off the pan. This is basic harpsichord. I think there's at least three different instrument presets on this particular synthesizer. I was thinking I was doing like a real simple set of double and like single notes to move in between what the track's doing. So let's turn everything on and see. Oops. That's what I want. Basically, it's that, but pairing with chords to kind of complement the note. The idea would be that this repeats more rapidly and kind of pairs with the bass line because it follows a similar rhythm. Let's see if we can get it to actually capture. The trick is going to be doing that with one hand while hitting the start and stop record so that it actually syncs and it doesn't just muddle the whole thing. Yeah, that's the rhythm, but obviously I messed up the end. I'm not a piano player, in case it wasn't incredibly apparent. I mostly just kind of trial and error my way through stuff whenever we're working on songs. So that's what you're getting in real time. I could also do it single note too, but I need to get better with my chords. All right, let's try again. Oh, hit the wrong button, my bad. Close. It's the last note that's off slightly. I thought about investing in a pedal for the loop when I'm doing stuff like this, because I have to hit the start and stop on the loop with one hand and then actually play the notes with the other hand and then stop it on time. If I had a pedal that I could just use my foot and then my hands would be free, but I don't have one, so. All right, let's try it. Whoops. That would have been off anyway. Not bad. It still seems like it's off slightly. Let's try the other piano ones. Might be a little bit less aggressive compared to the harpsichord. You could do two notes too. I'm trying to think of a good place to harmonize with the. You can go for a second. The synth note that's two note steps, which was up here. I see Red Dragon's going to be right back. All right. Hopefully I will have gotten a little bit further on this track. This one's giving me a little more trouble than these normally do. It doesn't normally take me this long to start putting together the basics, but again, not having a rhythm is actually throwing me off more than I expected. This is just a standard piano with the panning delay to give it a little bit of an echoey reverb and delay on it. That's not bad. I'm trying to think if maybe go regular delay. That might make it echo a little bit less. Okay, this is a different slicer pattern. This one that's got to be 16th notes. Yeah. You can go 16th note panning. That's going to make it sound like it's fading, like really rapidly, kind of like vibrating in and out. I actually think that might work for what we're trying to do here. Let's cut it down so it's not quite as staticky. Okay, I do like how it sort of echoes and then fades out of the audible channel, so you're not hearing it just constantly. Hey, Red Dragon's back. Okay, so this is interesting. Again, I might have to tweak this one a little bit. We have 4 captured tracks, no rhythm, right? The bass line is what drives sort of the tempo of the track. It's pretty noticeable in the pattern. There's the bass line plus the main 2-step synth. So these two together. Really simple. I think the The synth itself might be slightly off tempo, but the idea is that these two kind of pair together. We have the intermittent chime, which comes and goes. It sort of staggers. So it comes in here. Then it fades out, then it comes back in, so on and so forth. Now what I added was this piano line that has the 16th note slicer and panning delay to make it fade and kind of, again, vibrate around. It's not bad, but I'm not exactly sure what the track needs. It's going to make it sound a little more complete. Again, I don't normally skip the rhythm entirely since that drives a lot of the style of the song. But for like an ambient theme, that one does have potential, but I might have to marinate on that one a little bit and work on it offline. Because we could go back and add a beat, but like I mentioned before, if you don't do the beat first, then the syncing can get kind of weird since it's going to sync to the bass line. The bass line was the first recorded track, which establishes the BPM. But without having that in place, it's going to basically assume that the tempo, in quotes, is the bass line. We can see what happens, but I wanted to not have a rhythm just to see what the end result would be. And end result is something very strange, but kind of unique compared to everything else. So I'm gonna file that one. It's saved on here. I might tweak that one a little bit more and see what we can do with it. But let's move on and do another one. This one, let's do kind of more by the book. But style-wise, let's see. Maybe something a bit higher energy for sure. Let's go to the drum kits. Oh, no, we do not want panning delay on the drum kit. Well, let's do something a little bit faster and kind of go more like the electronic route, but we'll see what the tone kind of becomes as we go. Erdrance is high in speed. We could do a drum and bass. Drum and bass is probably the genre of music that ends up being the fastest for the stuff that I make. That is going to be probably not that particular type of drum. Ooh, sorry, it was a little loud. I do like drum and bass a lot. I'm trying to get better at doing things in that particular style. You could use this and layer in some of the other snares in addition to the synth one here. Or you could even filter it. The muffled version might pair well with one of the unmuffled ones. Huh. That's actually interesting. I don't think I've done one that sounds like that before. Let's record a couple layers of the actual percussion. I would like to do the muffled filtered one here with the snare. But also layer in some ones that aren't muffled so it builds it out a little bit more. So let's give it a try. That is surprisingly harder to hit on the beat. what I'm doing is I want to layer in another snare before I worry about the kick. Not that one. Ooh, this is a dance snare. We've got this kind of weird, like, punchy synth. Almost sounds kind of like something you hear at a sports event. Let's put a hat, like a kind of a fast running hat, but not with a weird kick at the end. Makes it sound like someone's running. All right, not a bad start. Now, for something drum and bass, obviously we need bass. Too much bass. There we go. Oh, that's why. I wanted it to be kind of distorted, but I had the wrong effect on. That worked better. Let's go further down. I like the way that sounds a little bit better. All right, let's move on to mid-high end synth sounds for the melody. Got an idea for this one. Let's see how it pans out. Let's go slicer. Let's go pattern 5. This is 30-second notes, but it's not on a one in one pattern. This is pattern 5, which is kind of more like a gallop. So this one kind of comes and goes, and again, it has a different rhythm to it. But because it's kind of matching speed with the tempo and the bass line, then it sounds more rapid. Again, it sounds like something moving really quickly, like a vehicle, or maybe someone sprinting very fast because someone's chasing them. All right, let's think of something else we can pair with the bass line, rhythm, and the first high synth. This is a sitar. I don't think I've used a sitar in a while. Not bad. I don't know if I'm married to that melody. Let's try another instrument. That has potential, though. Banjo. Actually sounds kind of like a koto, Japanese instrument, but this is actually a muted banjo. This is a regular banjo, like steel string. Might be able to do something funky with that banjo. It's got potential. Let's try it. Actually does kind of fit. Interesting. I did that completely randomly. Normally when you think drum and bass, you don't think banjo. Okay, let me save my progress so far. This track is coming along way faster than the last one. So for folks who've been hanging out here on the jam stream so far, and are probably incredibly frustrated by me noodling around with that first one, this second track is usually how stuff comes together a bit more quickly. But props to Red Dragon for giving me a challenge and something I haven't done before. Tells me I need to step outside my comfort zone a little bit. All right, let's save this real quick. We still have one more track that we can fill with an instrument, but so far we have a decent start for a drum and bass track. If we think about how we would structure it, again, not ready to move on just yet, but if we're just thinking about the structure, I think we'd probably go like fade in the bass line. Maybe let that ride for one repeat. Then we bring in the beat. We could even do a drop. That's fun. Pick it up. Maybe go fader or filter. We cut out the beat. Red Dragon says, I just thought of an idea for an album. Need to talk in Discord sometime with you about it. Yeah, send me a message. Send me a message on Discord if you have an idea. I'm always down for people giving me suggestions. So I'm thinking about how the song would essentially outro. Kind of the idea that it, like a parabolic curve, it starts in a similar state that it ends in. And it finishes with the bass line. That's definitely an option, I think. I don't think I have a drum and bass adjacent song that sounds quite like this. I got one that uses something similar with the synth, but it doesn't do it with that type of melody. It's a similar pattern, but a different set of notes. All right. I'm going to save that one. I actually don't know if it needs another track, but we could move on to another idea. And if I work on this one more offline and add something else, then I can always throw it in there. But I think 4 tracks actually has a lot to work with. Between, I don't know if I'm going to do a drop. The drop is fun and it's a little silly, but we could do something like that. We'll see. We'll see. Oh, names. Let me put the track back on. For you folks listening in the chat, I mentioned before that I occasionally take suggestions for names of the tracks. Let me put the whole thing back on and let it play for a minute. If anybody has any suggestions for a name, I will write it down and put it into consideration when I actually record this one later. So here's what the whole thing sounds like. In the meantime, let me look at where I want to go for the instrument set for the next one. Let's try and do one more after this before we call it a stream for today. This is just me messing around with one of the other instrument sets while I think about what I want to do for the next one. All right, I'll leave the door open for names if people think of one so we can move on and not just idle for now. Okay, let's save a copy. Clear everything off, and this will be the next one we start. What I was initially thinking, you can hear me kind of just playing around in the background. Let's see, what genre would that be? Kind of a more kind of electronic driving sound, but not like as fast and as rapid as something like drum and bass. I do want to kind of eventually branch out into trying to write more hip-hop stuff, since obviously I could use things like hip-hop beats for potential tracks to rap over later. Weirdly enough, it might be hard to believe, but that's a style, at least with this tool set, that I feel like I'm one of the least qualified to do. I just need to practice more and come up with more ideas. 'Cause I listen to a lot of hip hop, but when it comes to creating hip hop stuff with this set of tools, for some reason it just doesn't come naturally to me, which you'd think would be not the case, right? All right, let's do something like this. I don't know what the tone is going to be, but we'll figure it out. Oh, it's off. Let's drop this way down so it's not quite so loud, like a ride cymbal. Add another kind of hat. Okay, I think for the bass line, I want to go for something a little more kind of aggressive. Not necessarily aggressive in tempo, but kind of aggressive in feel. So I think a good way to do that would be to take something like a distorted electric guitar, run it through guitar to bass, and then give it some distortion so it doesn't sound like, just a regular guitar. What we can use, there's a couple different options here. This is just what they call an overdriven guitar, similar to running it through like a distortion pedal. Electric guitar run through something that gives it a bit more kind of distortion to it. If we take it, we combine it with guitar bass to give it low end, but then throw something that really distorts the sound. This is a filter, which might not be what we want. This is not in the note progression I want to use because there's a couple of songs that we've done that sound kind of similar. Nemesis Effigy from last year's Halloween project and String Guillotine follow similar progression, so we don't want to use that like 1 to 2 note step, but similar sound. This is going like chromatic steps down. That's an option. That's a long bass line. I don't think I want it to be quite that long, but messing around half steps might be an interesting change from some of the other bass lines we've done. Descending half steps and then full step, I think that is. That is definitely a note progression I haven't used in a bass line before. What if we combine that with strings, but drop it down and we give it a rhythm. I'm thinking quarter notes, slicer. But I think I need to drop the volume way down so it doesn't overpower the one we've already got. Oh, we can even drop it lower an octave. That makes it even more kind of blended together. What if we went eighth note? And we don't want it to sound that rapid. Okay, let's layer that in. Okay, let me keep the playback not too loud so I can still talk over this. All right. Let's give it a mid-range synth sound or like a high synth sound. I want to go back to my favorite 329, but let's see what we can combine with it to give it a bit more of a distinct sound than just the straight up default. Oh, this is phaser. What this does with the settings I've got, it takes an input and it gives it this sort of like ray gun type sound, which is kind of neat, but not exactly what I'm looking for here. This is flanger. This is same instrument with flanger turned on and slicer at 16, but pattern 2. What did pattern 1? Oh, that's why. That's not bad. We could add a panning delay instead of the flanger. The flanger makes it kind of sound tinny and echoey. So the idea for this one would be to give it a constant high melody that complements the kind of tempo, and then we would basically turn this on and off, not to have it running constantly because it'll get annoying in your ear, I think. Let's capture that. Oh, overlapped it. Let's try again. It's all right. I was trying another note. You can go higher too. Ooh, that harmony's not bad though. Let's time it right though. this is just one octave up. The panning delay makes it kind of linger. So let's capture and layer it on top. Okay, so we have 3 basic tracks so far. Now, what would be another good fourth track to add that's going to complement everything so far? Let's take a look at the instrument list. Ooh, this is kind of a almost like a plucked synth. This isn't the note I want to use. I'm just getting a feel for the sound. We could do like a higher synth run. This goes in the background. There we go. But let's see if we can pair it with a good complementary effect. Ooh, this is just panning delay again. Oh, maybe a little too high. We have that repeat. That's got potential. Let's capture that. That one might conflict with the track 3 though. So maybe we have these alternate. Okay, this one didn't quite gel as fast as the drum and bass one, but I do think it's got potential. The mood is kind of, again, a little bit more aggressive, but it's not like a metal song aggressive. More of a dark key. Sounds like maybe it might be a boss theme or something. I'm actually less committed to the 3rd track now. I like the 4th one a lot more. But I'll have to think. I think it does need another instrument that goes along with this. I was thinking strings initially. was thinking of like some chords on the black keys up here. That's closer. Huh. I just tried that randomly. Yeah, let's add that in. I should have taken the track 3 off while I was doing the strings. Yeah, I might drop track 3 out and think of something else to put there, but that seems to match up a lot more. I like the way that sounds. So before we wrap up, let's think of how this one would be performed structure-wise. We could lead in with the string part. I don't do that super often. We could fade in with strings. You fade into the bass line. Bring in the synth and cut it out and actually start the beat. Now we bring in the piano synth. Maybe alternate, cut out the beat. I think we'd have to fade that out. Cutting it off abruptly would sound like you're just chopping the strings, which we don't want. The outro could be we have the bass line, then we finish on the piano synth. That could be fun. All right. Not bad. We got a little bit more of a challenge to put that one together, but it does sort of kind of communicate the mood that we talked about at the beginning. So for this one, same deal. Let's open it up for potential suggestions on a name. If nothing comes up, then I will file this one too, and then we'll see what I want to use it for later. This one could be a good candidate for a Halloween album because it's a bit more kind of dark and moody. Not for the upcoming one. All the tracks on this year's Halloween project are done, but that could definitely be something I purpose into a future Halloween release. I would also, just for transparency purposes, I would like to do kind of a more dark experimental album similar to what we do on Halloween, but not on Halloween. I got no problem doing more than one of those a year if I have enough ideas. So we'll see. I have a couple potential ways to develop that concept for something that's not just Halloween related. Kind of from like a mythology perspective and whatnot. But we'll see. Here, I'll put the track back on in case anyone has ideas for names for it before we get ready to wrap up for today. There, I'm just going to drop the playback down a little so I can still talk over this. I don't know if I want to do filter transitions because we just talked about doing that on the previous one. Could even play around the idea of putting the piano synth on a one shot so that it goes off whenever I hit the button, and then I choose kind of where I want to sprinkle that one instead of just having it repeat on the same rhythm over back to back to back to back to back. That's an interesting idea. Alright, I'm just taking a look at the raid list to kind of save some time while we're getting ready to wrap up. Oh, I see Dio's online. We can go raid her. I haven't seen her live in a bit. All right. Again, I will leave the kind of door open for names. I don't like to put people on the spot. So in the future, if anyone comes up with potential names for stuff, you can always send them to me. That being said, let's go ahead and do one final save. Make sure all of our work doesn't get wasted, because I have done that on stream before, which is extremely embarrassing. But let's go ahead and head over to Raid Dio. In the meantime, let me go ahead and mute this and go to outro. And we will call that a somewhat successful jam stream. We got some tracks put together. Hopefully the discussion of beatbox technique and sound theory was interesting. We will be back on Saturday. Red Dragon, if you're still here, I believe we are going to be resuming the pain in Elden Ring with a collab. So, again, if you want to come watch two goobers suffer greatly in the DLC, we'll be doing that noon Pacific Saturday. In the meantime, I hope everybody has a good evening. Shout out once again to Wazzy and the crew for the raid. Much appreciated. I'm glad you folks could drop by and witness the chaos. But until then, again, have a good rest of your evening, morning, and I'll catch you in the next one. Now let's go see how Dio's doing in Death Stranding. Oh, that'll be fun. All right, I'll catch you folks later.